Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special time capsule episode of the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, as always, the Grand Poobah of Frasier, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn!
I gotta be honest, Dev. I lost the bet. I really had money down that you were gonna open up with "Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight," like some variation on or equivalent to.
My mind right now is mush. I just got to be completely honest with you. We will. I don't know if we'll ever talk about it on an episode. You and I will talk about it after an episode, but I put too much on my plate today. Is what I just have to admit. I'm sitting
you put a
here.
little Smilex on your face.
But this is a time capsule episode. It's recorded out of space and time. Right now it is June. It is June 19th, 2023 when we are recording this, which, if you're keeping track, means you just listened to the David Dorfman Cinematic Universe Part 2 of Duh. And we're sorry about that.
You always throw me for a loop when you date these things, because I come into these things assuming that we're not even gonna like acknowledge the weirdness. It's just, hey, they just talked about Batman for an entire episode.
But I know it throws you, but it's paramount as to why we're doing what we're doing here today.
Oh.
So in two other time capsule episodes, we have covered films that are the direct result of the success of what we're talking about today.
We've mentioned many.
We have mentioned many.
But do we not have like a third? I thought we had.
Well,
talked
there's
about,
a third too, but that wasn't in a time capsule episode.
Okay.
So the time capsule episodes are Darkman, which we quoted from an obscure quote in the middle of it, like death, real estate, and taxes or something like that. But go listen to it. We talked about Darkman, the Sam Raimi movie that probably wouldn't have happened if Batman hadn't been successul. And then we covered Dick Tracy.
For a lot of reasons, both because like the world allowed it because Batman was successful, and also Sam Raimi had a fire in his heart.
It trust, Sejohn. It's about trust. It's scandalous. But yeah, so we covered Darkman. That was the first one that we looked at. And then we looked at, in a regular episode, but we did record it as a Christmas, so we could have Christmas off, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the film from 1990, that until...
Christmas special. Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
that until very recently was the, like, highest grossing independent film ever. And that movie... Like, Ninja Turtles were big, but you're not convincing the studios. New Line Cinema is not buying the Golden Harvest independent film if we don't see Batman do what Batman does.
Right.
And then the final one, which was originally going to be titled It's a Federal Offense, but fell during a report week, is The Dick Report, where we talked about Dick Tracy, Warren Beatty's pet project that, again, I'm pretty sure, we're both pretty sure, only got greenlit and was allowed to be made because of the success of the film we're talking about today. Now, I've already talked about it.
I have to say, on that one in particular, I actually think there's an interesting conversation to be had about the choices that Warren Beatty, who for all intents and purposes, we understand to be basically the creative force behind that film, right? Yes. Like, that's what the world understands, right?
Well, not everything of that film. Some of that film is Al Pacino just right? being insane on camera.
Oh, fuck me. Oh, God, that movie. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the choices that are made in making a Batman film that I think Warren Beatty looks at and goes, I'm going to make one for the kids. This isn't family friendly. And does his Dick Tracy one that, I mean, felt like you could have had fucking Archie and the gang walk through and it would have made sense. Like that world, for all of the weird, dark stuff that happens in that movie, it is such a lighthearted film compared to Batman, and we'll talk about some of that, I think.
Right. So that's all what we've done prior to us talking about Batman from 1989, Tim Burton's Batman. Mm-hmm. But there's another thing that is a driving force behind us doing this episode. And that is the fact that, I mean, right now, Sejohn, if you could see me, I'm wearing my Flash t-shirt. So badly.
Oh man, this is I think people can tell when there is a situation, or a topic is a better word to use there. Situation, a topic that has come up that either one of us, both of us, like we're just like, oh, this is not the thing we want to be talking about. But we would be remiss to not mention.
Yes.
I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna couch this shit out of the next. I'm giving you 5 minutes to talk about the
That's
Flash.
fine. I'm not going to talk about the Flash for much longer than Sejohn and I. There is an unwritten code of the Say Report. And what better place to put that than into this time capsule to be buried and up and listened to, hopefully more than 3 months down the line.
Yeah, so that no one can ever hold us to it.
Right. It is an unwritten thing, but one of the unwritten things, and honestly, if you had asked me back when we started this show in 2017 if this would ever be an issue, I would have said, what the fuck is wrong with you? But there has been a thing that has happened in cinema lately that happens in The Flash. So spoilers for The Flash. I have not seen it yet. Really, if I had my druthers prior to this weekend, you'd be listening to a time capsule episode about The Flash. But here's a little secret, not even related to the unwritten rules of the Say Report. I don't want to give that movie any fucking money at all.
Oh, so that's not where we're going. I thought we were going to be talking about that being a rule for us, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to start tying ourselves to some...
No. That's not it. That's not it.
Okay.
It is one of those situations where if I could have seen that movie for nothing, if like I could have gotten a press screener, I don't think they would have liked that. Oh yeah, we're going to review your movie, and it'll be released sometime when we don't have content ready to go on a Monday. Deal?
Yeah.
It's a movie that I really want to see, and I got to tell you, it's because I fucking love Ben Affleck, and I fucking love Michael Keaton as Batman.
I know.
It's
and how do you? I'm gonna butcher her name at first until you correct me. But Sasha Calais, is that how
Sasha
you say her
Calais?
name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like for all the interviews and stuff that she's done, because she's been the one that they've sent out to do all the press stuff for obvious reasons.
Yes.
She's just been phenomenal, like charming and really cool. And I don't have a connection point for her yet. So like being able to connect her to something like Supergirl would be fucking awesome. Like I would love to have that. I would love to have like as somebody that's always looking for up and coming talent in all sorts of places, like especially in the superhero genre, because right now you have a lot of old blood, right? Though I will say Disney is making some strong efforts in that regard, in as far as introducing younger characters and people to right. But to the point, like I would love to see this movie in the sense that like what it does narratively. I'd love to see this movie in terms of what it does with characters, from what I understand, show up in it and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of really cool and interesting stuff that I would definitely be interested in, but there's just a big old problem right in the middle that I just don't know if I can get over.
Now you say that there's a big old problem right in the middle. I don't know if we have the same problem.
I think we've got similar problem. I think we've got a similar. I think there's a larger problem that we both have, but we're noticing different symptoms. Let me put it that way.
That's yeah. I mean, the big one for me, and the one where as soon as I heard about it, it was like, this is a movie that we're not going to dedicate an episode to. We'll dedicate at most 5 minutes to it, and that is because if we were really talking about this movie, Flash putting a baby in a microwave, that's a solid 7 minutes. So we're going to knock 2 off of that, and the Flash is going to get 5 minutes on this show. For me, it is the CGI puppeteering of deceased actors.
Yeah.
That, I mean, we're in agreement. What they did with Harold Ramis in Ghostbusters Afterlife, you still haven't seen the movie, right? Like,
no.
Yeah.
And you know the other one that I remember got me at the time, and I have not seen the movie since. I'm not going to say that it's because of this. There's other reasons why I haven't. But I also I was brought to my attention that also at the end of Rogue One, they bring that dude back from like the original like Empire, right? Or whatever it is.
Grand Moff Tarkin?
Yeah. They like CGI that dude over. Like I think in that case it was like his kid's face, but that's not an excuse. I didn't like that movie. So I mean, like I didn't dislike that movie like some movies in the world, but I don't have any soft spots in my heart for that movie either. So like to that, it's not just the Harold Ramis of it all. I want to point out, like this is a thing that this is now more than a trend. This is just what we do now.
Yeah, now it's the thing, and you know the two that are in Flash, Christopher Reeve, that's one thing, but George Reeves and the fact that like his whole story, Like, it just feels really, really gross. And alongside that, and I'm going to try to say this with as little spoilers as possible.
Wait, just this is a weird connection that has no merit on anything. But didn't Ben Affleck play George Reeves at some point in a movie? Wasn't didn't he
Possibly.
play him
Oh.
in some crime thriller about everything that happened with George Reeves? Right?
Yeah. I don't
What
remember
is that movie?
I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
look that up while you talk.
Yeah. And I'm going to try to say this without spoilers because I know that Sejohn hasn't said it and the movie doesn't deserve it. But another film came out in theaters that used archival footage, and some of those actors have passed. And honestly, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't
Hollywoodland,
bother.
everybody.
What was
With
it?
Adrian Brody. Hollywoodland. With Adrian
Hollywoodland,
Brody as
yeah.
the detective. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's completely fine. Like, using archival footage does not bother me. They
That would have
agreed
been a
to.
fucking buck wild poll if they pulled in Ben Affleck as Superman from within the world
Holy
within
fuck.
Hollywoodland. Oh my god,
That would have
Sorry.
been fucking crazy.
You're trying to make a very serious point. And I'm having a very dumb
No, it's fine.
revelation
No,
over
it's
here.
fine. It's completely all the connections and all the
The
connections.
dichotomy of this era. Go ahead.
We're on the Sarah board, Sejohn. We can do it. It's not Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. We're allowed to be talking about everything, despite the theme of this being
just not all at once. I think is the problem.
Yeah, that's it. No, it's okay. Like archival footage, which was utilized a lot with things that happened in Across the Spider-Verse, and that's all I'm going to say. It works because they are films that we have already seen. But when you create a CGI representation of somebody who has passed away, and then you put it in the movie, and then also kind of just disregard everything else that happened in that person's life,
Yeah.
that's like real gross.
Yeah,
And
it's like to step back from the Flash, because as you mentioned, we both have not seen it, so I'm not
Yeah.
going to focus too much on that, especially because in this case we have other examples, right?
Yes.
With the Harold Ramis thing in particular, I really did come to realize that if it had been something like pictures of him on the mantle, footage of him like on VHS, even just like memories, because the guys are like reminiscing, and then it's just flashing back to, as you said, film footage that we've seen, right? Like some like some measure of, we're not going to try and, I mean, as you said it, we're not going to puppeteer this figure, right? Like we're not going to make him do or say anything he didn't do when he was alive. That is a fine line, I think, for us to draw, right?
yeah, it is. And honestly, it's such a weird thing in that movie. It is such a weird thing in Ghostbusters Afterlife. And honestly, we're also in a time where they've just revealed the logo of the next Ghostbusters movie. And I'm like, I don't think I care anymore. I think that Afterlife, I know that it worked for a lot of people, but for me, it undid a lot of work in addition to creating a CGI Egon Spengler and having him be a ghost. It undid a bunch of the work of the Ghostbusters video game. And people always look at me like, that was not canon. And I'm like, but at the time that it was written, when Harold Ramis was alive and he wrote the script of that with Dan Aykroyd, they said this is considered the sequel to Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like
it was canon at the time. Like, I don't.
Right. I think the bigger thing is not so much whether or not you agree it was before or not. People should at least understand that there is a huge disconnect there for people that feel that way, right? And like introducing that huge disconnect, like you have to respect that's what they did with a bunch of fans, and like, you know, not so many fans that it ruined them, and it did well enough that they're going to do the sequel. People, as you pointed out, like there are people that really enjoy that film, and I'm like in this weird place with the sequel because like my big issue with the last one was a lot of behind the scenes stuff with them talking about the ways they were going back to what the fans wanted, and all this like fan servicey shit at a time that we were still talking about stuff like the Snyder Cut and things like that, right? Like it was just feeding this monster at the time, and I didn't love that. And now, you know, we're not in that world anymore. So am I cool with going to see this movie? Am I going to watch that one? I don't know, because creatively, one of my big issues with it is that like it doesn't do the thing that I love in Ghostbusters, which is the blue collar city worker, right? Which is like the bit of Ghostbusters. And that's just to my understanding, at least not in this one, right? So like it just doesn't feel like a Ghostbusters movie to me. And so bringing it back into the city and all this sort of stuff is kind of interesting. I don't know. Like I'm in this really weird place with the Ghostbusters stuff right now because like you, I don't care, or at least I don't care enough to to really figure this problem out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I'm not going to see it in theaters. I have no issue, like I did on my birthday, renting it, purchasing it on Amazon or from any other place, or just being on a streaming service and watching it with my family in the comfort of our home. That's what Ghostbusters warrants from me now, because they kind of betrayed what I felt it was about as a fan. And they did it in a way that, like, not only spit on the legacy of one of the members, but then also created the CGI version of him to do with what they wanted. But all of this is why we're not going to talk about The Flash, right? Even if we had seen it, I think after seeing it, it would have been a scramble to, what are we going to do? Because we can't talk about that.
We can't talk about it.
We can't talk about that movie. And the answer is, we're going to take from our Darkman, our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, our Dick Tracy, and be inspired by what is going on right now in cinemas, which is a return of Michael Keaton to the role of Batman. If Batgirl had happened, that's when this episode probably would have happened, with the 1-2 punch of Brendan Fraser playing freaking Firefly in that film. That bit of lost media that was sacrificed to the gods of HBO Max for tax
This is what
rebates.
people were saying, though, in like 87, 88, when the script for this very movie had been pretty much lost into a vault somewhere. And the way that it got out, you know, like, it got handed through back rooms. Like, did you hear about any of this?
I just
yeah, like
too much on my plate still.
Yeah, so Batman 89, right? Like the idea of turning Batman into a film had been in the works for a decade or so before that, right? Like it had been years that people had been thinking about making Batman movie. It just had all these different iterations. And at some point in like 85, 86, that's when it gets kind of really close to what we end up seeing on screen for this, right? And so somebody writes this treatment for this, and the studio still just doesn't want to do it. So it just kind of like disappears. But by that point, so many comic book fans had kind of heard, you know, because again, it had been almost a decade that people had been trying to make this movie. Like people had started to hear rumors about it and all this stuff, right? So they got a copy of it, and infamously, like, copies of the Batman 89 script, not the final script that we end up seeing in the film, but like an early like treatment of Batman ends up kind of getting out into the water in some way. And it's like that piled on top of some other stuff going on in Hollywood at that time. Like it kind of I mean, not in Hollywood, sorry, in the comic book stuff, because like you suddenly get like the resurgence of Batman being popular again at the end of the 80s and stuff, right? I think Frank Miller is the one responsible for that, isn't he?
After the movie I just watched to talk about on the show today, I can't think of who else would have been influencing the popularity of Batman.
The wild thing
time
is, I think the earliest treatment of this version of this script, it had other characters and other stuff, right? But I don't think that Miller's Dark Knight Returns had come out yet. It's by the time this movie gets made, it does, right? Like so it's weird where Returns falls, because it does seem so influential for this, right? But yeah, so like one of the big things, it's one of those early instances of like the fans like getting a hold of something maybe they shouldn't have and like losing their shit. Like it's kind of where the DC story starts, and it really starts to explain a lot of shit about things like the Snyder Cut and shit like that.
Well, I mean, and you can't discount Richard Donner's Superman 2. Richard Donner's cut of Superman 2, and the fact that after the movie is shot and after he edits it, they fire him, bring on another director to produce a version of that film that they are okay with. Mm-hmm. Like, in addition to, because Superman, the original Superman, You'll Believe a Man Can Fly, is when Warner Brothers and DC have to be like, we got to do a Batman movie, right? End of the 70s is when...
Yeah, end of the 70s is definitely when the ball starts rolling on that shit. The problem is at that time, the most famous version of Batman is West, right? Yeah. And I love that shit, but that is the version that movie producers want to make, right? Is they want to do a goofy-ass, like, campy Batman story with these silly characters in tight costumes. And, like... that is just, it is very specifically like a small group of artists working together being like, no, that's not the Batman movie we should make. And so that's why it doesn't get made for like ever.
Yeah. And I think, thankfully so. If this Batman 1989, like the other reason that we're doing it, regardless of all of our own history with this particular topic, this is the reason why comic book movies are still relevant today. This movie is the one, and it might be my own opinion, but if Batman 1989 does not come out with its $35 million budget, making $40 million in its opening weekend, like, we are not living in the world where there is a comic book movie coming out at least every year. Sometimes 2, 3, 7.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Yeah, so there's like, so as you can tell, this is going to be a very fanboy heavy episode, right? Like, we're going to be heavily biased towards this film, but like, it's because this is a movie we both grew up with. This is the movie the world grew up with. Like, this is one of the big ones, right? And I actually think I found myself going down a weird rabbit hole, and I will admit it started with Wikipedia, but then I started going deeper to figure this shit out because it was wild. Okay, if you could tell me, this is where we're going to start. Could you give me a good solid guess on the cost of a VHS tape in 1989?
Like $40.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, so they underpriced Batman. Like, they did this crazy ass thing where, first of all, they waited less than 6 months to put it out. It was like a huge move that they were like, fuck this, we're getting this on VHS so we can get this into people's houses. So they rushed it out. And then on top of that, they underpriced it at $25. And most places were like, when it first came out, doing huge Batman sales. So basically, I just to give like a conservative estimate on what a sale would mean, $20. People were able to, when Batman came out, less than 6 months after they had seen it in theaters, run out the door and buy a $20 VHS in 1989 of what they already at that knew was a success. Like, that is why I am convinced every house in this country has a copy of Batman somewhere in it, a VHS copy. Even if you don't have VHSs anymore, you're going to be going through a bin someday and you're just going to be like, oh right, there's a copy of Batman I still got around, because everybody could afford it. And it was like at a time when that was not always the case with some movies, because you say $40, but I know that was a time when some movies were still coming out at like 80, right? Like, there is some crazy, and you were also getting a lot of like double length movies and stuff like that too, and people had to get 2 VHSs and stuff. Like, so the idea that they underpriced this movie and like so quickly from theater to home is a huge reason why I think this movie becomes kind of the movie that sets all this shit off, because you're basically guaranteeing everybody has seen it.
Yeah, not only is it huge in theaters, inspiring a bunch of other films, including like films that were supposed to be out before Batman. Like, that's the other crazy thing, is I think like Ninja Turtles was going to release, and they're like, oh, we don't want to go up against Batman. And then because Batman hits, they're given more money and able to shoot and make a better film. The same thing happens with Dark. Like, all of those movies, like, part of that influence from Batman is the fact that it's like, oh yeah, no, we're going to give you more money to make this movie better, because it needs to have the Batman effect.
Hey man, rising tide raises all ships.
It raises
right?
all
like,
ships.
Like, it's part of the reason why the DC versus Marvel movie stuff gets so silly sometimes, is because like the people making those movies are not sitting there hoping that DC does better than Marvel. First of all, some of them are hoping to work for both eventually, right? Like James Gunn, right? Like, this idea being that like they're rooting for the other to fail is ridiculous, right? Because they both recognize that as long as people are going to superhero movies regardless, like, we can both survive in this. Yeah. So
it's a very strange shift that has happened from 1989 to today, where like the fatigue, unfortunately, of comic book movies touches everybody. So like The Flash coming out after what has been just a deluge of comic book features, and some of them great, some of them not so great, like exhaustion has set in. And by stationing themselves as the last point of the comic book movies for the summer, right? Is that, I don't think I'm completely off base with that, right? Because we're not seeing another CBM until November with the Marvels. I can't think of another one that's set to come out.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think there's probably some TV stuff that we're probably going to see.
Well, yeah, because
with
Secret
Disney.
Invasion starts on Wednesday.
Right.
On the
So, like,
21st,
I
so
do think there's going to be some of that. But yeah, I think you might be right.
yeah,
I mean,
and
to the point, we don't know, right? Like,
yeah.
we can't pull one out of our head right now. There might be one coming out, but it's not one that we're
I mean,
anticipating.
Indiana
so
Jones
badly.
is coming out, but Indiana Jones and the Dial of Time is not a comic book movie. That's a movie. And
I mean,
even
he
like
is a superhero, but we're not going to talk about
no, because I'll derail the entire class and upset the professor. Or there's like the Ninja Turtles movie, Mutant Mayhem, which is coming, but that is very influenced by the cartoon, not the comics. So like it's
Yeah. I mean, yeah, here's the thing. I think that while they definitely start in the comics, there's definitely comic fans and people aware of them being in the comics. I think even when I first think of the Ninja Turtles, I don't think of the comics.
Right.
I think of the IP, right? I think of the movies. I think of the cartoon shows. I think of the comics. I think of the movies that I've seen, the animated ones, and like it's the whole shebang when I think of Ninja Turtles nowadays. It's not just one source.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say Iron Man, there's a very definitive place where I can get my Iron Man, right?
Yeah, it's very true. So that's all it. And then you talk about the way that they priced Batman and the fact that like that's pretty much what lowered the prices of VHS in the 90s. Is the reason why eventually I was buying VHS for $5 of films from the 80s.
I do have to wonder if they did the low price thing to fuck Jack Nicholson. Do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's
right.
Definitely. Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
He gets to laugh all the way to the fucking bank on it. Like I don't think it worked too well, but at some point, somebody was like, "God damn it, he's making so much money off of this stupid movie."
Yeah, if we lower the amount that's coming in and we can say that it's a loss, we're selling them at a loss. It's that hinky Hollywood accounting. Yeah. Rearing its ugly head again as early as 1989. But then the other thing that is attached to Batman 1989 is the toy sales. The toy sales off of this movie that by all accounts, I mean, this isn't R-rated, right? Is this an R-rated film?
No.
Yeah.
You're at what? No, it can't be.
No, there's no way.
I would put money down that it's even PG.
Yeah.
Let me check.
Let's it's PG-13.
PG-13. Oh yeah, we're late 80s. That's a thing that happens.
That exists. Yeah. After Temple of Doom, PG-13 is an option for a PG-13 movie to have the toy line that comes alongside this film, and it is sold out everywhere. Do you know what Batman 1989 action figure I had?
Can I ask which one you had? I was like, I don't even have to ask if you had one. Which one did you have?
I had Bob. Bob was my Batman 1989 action figure.
Hey.
And that's crazy. It's first of all,
crazy.
It's crazy that a guy in a purple jacket with a fedora on was one of the toys that they sold. But people were so hungry for Batman merchandising, almost everybody got a figure. And
Dude,
he was
had
the one.
Fucking manor. I had the manor that opened up and it had all the secret passageways and shit like that down to the Batcave and all that. Yeah, it came with a Batman and maybe an Alfred. It came with a Batman for sure. That Batman is still around somewhere.
Eventually, I was able to get a Batmobile, and I immediately lost the missiles that came with it.
The
bright
gold
orange
missiles, right?
Yeah,
that
yellow
gold
missiles.
shiny plastic.
Yeah. I immediately lost one of those, and I was able to track down two Batmen. One that had like the grapple belt where you'd pull it out
nice.
and it zip back in. And my favorite Batman figure ever, and I know that I don't have it anymore, and it kind of breaks my heart just a little bit, is him. It is aping when he is in the turtleneck and the denim. Like just hanging out in the Batcave, like casual Batcave outfit.
So this movie goes on to influence, if not straight up, just be canon with the animated series, right? Like that is like the big thing that ends up growing out of this for me is like the animated series is where Batman's at for me, right? So what's funny about that is two things. First of all, the look that you're talking about is the look that they always put Bruce in whenever he's like chilling out, Bruce, like morning breakfast in like the Morning Dew, Bruce. Like
Yeah.
he has like the what's the like sheep's wool like turtleneck sweater and
Mhm.
like the he looks like an LL Bean model
Yeah, it's
basically. Like
ridiculous.
whenever they put him into that look, and it is directly inspired by him in this movie in those
Yeah.
moments. Like it has to be.
So it's that Bruce, and then he has the stuff so you can make him into Batman. Like it's like a
Nice.
transformer, but here are the gauntlets and here's the cowl. And like those were the things that I had from this film. But like everybody, this film was so influential and the toys sold so well that it became
Yeah.
a third revenue stream off of this movie. This movie hit on every possible level of profitability for Warner Brothers. And it's unsurprising that like comic book movies as a result went the way that they did. I mean,
I
the
wonder
term
if PG-13 went the way it did for the same reasons. You know what I mean? Like we're talking at about a time when PG-13 has really only been in the water for what, like 4 or 5 years at this point.
5 years about, yeah, because
Yeah,
84
so
is Temple of Doom.
there's not
So
many movies that are really getting it, and like there's a lot of people that are not really sure what it means, right? Because like kids can still go to it then, so what's the point, right? It's like there's PG-13 is a weird compromise by the MPAA for a lot of things. But to this, we now know, right? Like what, 33, 35 years on, like we now know that PG-13 is like the gold standard for if you want an easy, successful film, you put a dumb comedy out, you make it sure it's PG-13. You put an action movie out, you make sure it's PG-13, because that means that kids can spend some cash on it on a Friday night and not have to and be allowed in, right? Like they just do gangbusters, and it's why we know that there are things like, well, you need to cut this down, and artistic issues with that concept of like, you need to cut this down because we need it to be PG-13 so it makes its money back, like that shit. All like, I wonder how much you could pin that on something like Batman receiving the PG-13 at a time when it wasn't this token that was passed around, right? Like, so it gets it, I guess I would say, genuinely, right? And I don't disagree with some of the stuff in the movie, right? Like, I think it is pretty horrific at points, but I also would never call it an R-rated film. So I think PG-13 is about right for this one, right? But like, is this the movie that kind of ends up being kind of like the influence or the comparing point, right? Like well, we can go about as far as Batman did, at least, right? Like that
not
kind
to
of thing, right?
not to blow up if we ever cover Batman Returns on the show, which I don't think that's off the table. It is the 1-2 punch of Batman and Batman Returns. Is when
Yeah.
after that is when PG-13 becomes the profitability sweet spot, because you look at Batman and it is PG-13. It is rightfully so a PG-13. And then Tim Burton, when he is finally given carte blanche to make the Batman movie that he wants to make, makes that film. He pushes the limits of PG-13 to the point that like McDonald's, and I say McDonald's that way because think of them as this huge corporation that like wanted to sink the movie, because they had paid for all the rights and everything. We are going to be the people who are going to have the tie-in merchandise and the soda frisbee lids and the Happy Meal toys. We have ponied up a lot of money to get the Batman Returns thing. And then the movie comes out and McDonald's is pissed off that they are associated with something so graphic, so violent, so like on the verge of being rated R.
So part of the reason why they make Mac and Me is I don't know, I don't think it's Batman Returns, because I think Mac and Me came first. I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that. But this idea that they make Mac and Me specifically because somebody really high up at McDonald's is like really against all the gross movies that are coming out for kids. And like, so they're like, we're gonna make this wholesome movie with this alien, but there's not gonna be any like terrible like, you know, humor in it. There's not gonna, you know, like think about like the beer drinking in E.T. and stuff like that, right? Like that's what they're pointing at and like wagging their finger. So they want to make a movie like E.T., but they're not gonna have stuff like that in it, right? Like that kind of thing. And so they make Mac and Me, but like then they pump it with all of this like capitalist bullshit, which makes it just as toxic, if not more, depending on who you talk to, about what they're fighting against. It's like this really gross thing. It's just wild. I didn't realize how far their I guess evangelical like finger wagging went.
Yeah. So I mean, Macamee is 1988, so it's even before Batman 89. But
Yeah.
the reason why Batman Forever becomes what Batman Forever is to appease the lords of McDonald's, because they had been like, we're paying for both of these, we want the rights for them, and so they made it slick and bright and the polar opposite of what you eventually get in Batman Returns.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting thing looking at something like Batman 1989, because it is definitively a Tim Burton movie, which is a really interesting thing to say when you consider it's his third film, and you all know about my third film theory, right? You're going to see what a director is actually capable of in the third film that they make. So his first one, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, follows that up with Beetlejuice, and then he does Batman. And his Batman is decidedly Tim Burton, but with studio oversight.
Yeah.
And that's really important when you consider that he then follows it up with Edward Scissorhands, which, if there was a Tim Burton off-the-leash film, is Edward Scissorhands. And then somehow he goes even further off the leash with Batman Returns. Like, to the fact that it almost doesn't feel like a sequel to this film.
Oh, it feels like it's a completely different world in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's nuts that.
I mean, what happened to Vicky Vale, Sejohn?
Eating the fish.
Yeah. Just,
Man, fuck. We're not talking about that movie, though.
No, we're not talking about that movie right now. And to just go into the animated series, which again we're not talking about, that is a distinctly different continuity that is heavily influenced by this, but it's technically the past. Like, it's not meant to be. This is Gotham City of modern times. Right. In Batman 1989. They've gone on record as saying that the animated series is set in the past, like the 50s, 60s, but also, huge plot point of Batman 89, spoilers for a movie that is 34 years old, that Jack Napier was the one who ended up killing Thomas and Martha Wayne. That is not what happened in the animated series. To the fact that eventually Mask of the Phantasm, there have been so many Batman movies, and I did not realize that until I've just let them all vomit out of me into this time capsule.
I think the rest of the world has noticed them, so I'm going to tell you you're a little late to the game on
No,
that
it's
one,
not.
that revelation.
Clearly, I've seen all of them. It's just like, until you're thinking about it, you don't realize,
know what, though?
like...
You see Mask of the Phantasm, and my first thought was, that's the one I'd pay money to go see in theaters tonight.
Yeah.
Like, if I could go and see a Batman movie in theaters. Like, Under the Red Hood is up there, but if I could pay any money to go see a Batman movie tonight, it would be Mask of the Phantasm. Yeah. In a theater, though, like, on a big screen.
And that was a theatrical release. That's the other crazy thing about that movie.
Right.
Sorry. So...
Did Mr. Freeze one get a theatrical one, too?
I believe Sub-Zero had a brief theatrical release,
like a 1 weekend run type of deal. So Batman is big. I don't know if y'all noticed it.
And yet somehow he's playing second fiddle in the Flash movie. No, I kid. We're talking about
second fiddle in this movie. Can we talk about that?
Yes, we can. Let's talk about some of the intricacies of the 1989 Batman movie.
I mean, it's like, so just we're going to talk a little bit about the plot, so I don't think we need to do a full plot summary, because I think the big thing to talk about is the plot of this film, in the ways in which it breaks some pretty big cardinal rules for what I would consider most people think a good comic book movie, quotes, should do or shouldn't do. Like, I mean, one of the big ones is tying the Joker or Jack Napier to Bruce's parents' death, right? Like, that's one of the big ones that's one of the big leaps that this movie makes that is interesting, that at the time people seem to be totally on board with, and I feel like if you try that today, people would rip you to shreds. I mean, like, think about think about how hard it was for people to kind of get around the idea of in Joker, right? Like Todd Phillips Joker there, the whole story about the possibility of them being straight up related, right? Spoilers for that movie. It's not really a spoiler because it's not really settled on by the end of that movie, so I'm not telling you anything that like you're gonna get an answer about. But like yeah, like there's things that you just kind of don't do with Batman, right? And then one of the other big things is like it turns out that it's not really like an origin story for Batman. Like by the time we're talking to Batman, he's been doing this for a while.
Has he though? Has he been doing it for a while? Because the craziest thing about that is that he's been doing it for a while. There have been 8 sightings of the Batman in the past month.
If you told me that this was like year 2 Batman, I think that's where I could
believe that. Yes.
Yeah, because you got to keep in mind that some of this is borrowing from like Nolan and all other sources and stuff like that. But like the persona of the Bat and stuff like that, he didn't just like start there, right? He's doing shit before that. So like I feel like Bruce Wayne has been trying this vigilante shit for a while, and he is now finally getting into a groove, and bam, that's when this movie starts.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to see how long you think he's been doing it. Because weirdly,
if you told me year 2, I think I'd buy that.
Yeah, but there's that very distinct line in the beginning from Alex Knox of going, I mean, that's 8 sightings this month. I hear you started the file on this guy. And it's like, has he been doing it for a month? Is that what that line of dialogue is meant to convey?
Well, I think I can't believe we're about to do this, but I think it's actually a cool thing to try and do. I think what it's implying is we've been getting sightings about this guy for a while, but now this month it's been 8. Like it's a big jump. We've heard about him like, every couple of weeks, every couple of months we hear about this guy in a bat suit, but then all of a sudden we see him 8 times in a month. We should look into it, right? Like that. Like I think that's where he's kind of. Sorry, hit my microphone. My hands are all over the place as I Alex Jones this shit. But like I think that's where I read that line going, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's just one of those moments where I'm like, I always wonder how long he's been doing it. He's not very good at it in this movie. But as you were saying,
part of his whole steez, like what Michael Keaton was saying about the Bruce Wayne in particular is, I get the impression he's not good at hiding this, and most people would figure it out pretty quickly. So he was playing it that way.
Yeah, and it totally feels like there's that moment where he brings Vicky Vale to the Batcave, and the whole time I'm like, no, Batman, no, don't bring Vicky Vale to the Batcave. What are you doing? She's like awake.
No, boo.
No. It's one thing if
I know what you meant.
When they bring April to the turtle lair, she is passed out. She has been knocked out by the foot ninjas. And Raphael's like, I didn't know what else to do. But her just sitting in the passenger seat like, oh, look at that. We're on this rural road.
We seem to be going under Wayne Manor. I wonder where you...
Yeah, it's just like, this is like, what are you doing, Batman? And then when freaking Alfred just takes her to him hanging out in the Batcave, it's like, Alfred, you were fired. You let me know first.
All this prep work we've been doing for years, and you just walk somebody in here when they ask.
Yeah, it's weird. But yes, this is more of an origin story for the Joker. And going off of your same point of like, it's really weird to have such a close relationship between Bruce Wayne and the Joker, and the fact that he's the one who killed his parents. There are also people.
Well, and to tie into that, sorry, the other thought, just to put a bow on that, is to then also give an origin for the Joker, right? Like, so not only are you're it's the 1-2 punch of, we're going to make sure that that the Joker's responsible for Bruce Wayne's parents' death. Okay, all right, fine. Also, we're going to tell you that this is like part of his like origin story that you never knew before. Wait, what the fuck? Like, it's getting a little, it gets a real dicey in terms of like what it's willing to play with in terms of material. But I say that as somebody in 2023, right? Yeah. Like, so it's crazy to me as I was watching this movie. I was like, you couldn't do this shit today. Like, not that I wouldn't want to see you try, but fuck me, you'd get eaten alive.
I mean, and one of the reasons you can't do it today is because they did it all the way back in 1989 with Batman. Though I will say, knowing what we now know about the Joker and how the Joker has been written, there is that line from the Joker that really does feel like it was Sam Hamm kind of nodding to the audience of like, we get it. We understand. Like, just go with us. The movie's almost over. You've enjoyed it up to this point. Where he goes, and then you stole my thing. I said you made me, and then you say you made me. Like, it's just like, it's so perfect Joker, like, slammed fourth wall break of him calling out Batman for being like, don't steal my shit, man. Right? Like, that was my cool thing to say.
Like, okay, so we talked a little bit about Dick Tracy and how we felt like it was kind of influenced by this. I think one of the biggest influences is the ways in which Nicholson, who has a similar level of, not quite the same demands, but a similar level of demands as Pacino on Dick Tracy, right? And they let him go ham, and it pays off, like, in the film, right? And I think that you kind of do see the echo of that in Pacino, right? In Dick Tracy. Like, they're just like, oh, it worked for Batman and Nicholson, let's just do it. I don't know if you're gonna get the same results, but you know what the fuck. I think we famously talked about how Pacino was probably one of the highlights of that film, right?
Oh, he's definitely a highlight for that film. And also, we talked about the fact that it's like he got to design so much of the character. So like that big fat ass he has, that's Pacino saying, "I want a big fat ass."
You want to see my Dunkachino?
I want. Damn.
But Dunkachino. There it is.
Yeah, no, Duncan, it worked either way, CJ. He got that cake. But also, like, when he's dancing and doing show tunes, like, all Pacino. And you're right. That is an influence from it worked with Nicholson. But then, if we're going to look at the other two films that we do, Durant in Darkman is just as fucking scary as the Joker is at any moment. But he never really gets those moments to outshine Preston or Darkman, right?
Well,
like
and I think that comes from Raimi, right? Like, so that's where we start to talk about the difference between a guy like Burton and Raimi, where you'd be forgiven if you kind of put them in the same, like, artistic, bizarre wheelhouse, right? Like, I would totally be on board with you, like, putting those two up together in a celebrity death match, right? Like, but there's this thing that Raimi, like, just does, and that's that his heroes are the monsters, and, like, Burton is interestingly, like, kind of telling that story with Batman, but he's always wants Batman to be the good guy, right? I don't think Raimi always wants Darkman to be seen as the good guy. I think that's part of Raimi's whole, like, thing with that movie, right? Is like, no, he's not a hero, right? Right. Whereas with Batman, I do think that at the end of the day, as much as Burton wants to talk about them being two sides of the same coin, him and Joker, I do think that firmly states that one of those sides is gonna land up, right? And that's got to be Batman.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, looking at something
Two-Face
like
reference. I'm sorry, everybody.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I mean, Harvey Dent is in this movie, played by Mr. Billy D. Williams.
One of the best, like, amazing, greatest casting choices of all time. I love him as Harvey in this movie, and like for anybody that doesn't know, they did eventually give that character its due in comic form in 2021, I think. By the time
the Batman '89 comics,
and it's and they do the Harvey Dent storyline, like, it's part of the whole deal. But man, I really wish we could have seen Billy D. Williams himself do it, because God, that would have been phenomenal.
And that's the whole reason he signed on for what is a fantastic role in this film. Like, even though it's small, it's real world building from the script and from Burton to have him there as Harvey Dent.
Well, and on the screen, because you get to see a lot of, like, Harvey Dent stuff around in the background. Like, it really does give you a sense of what's going on in the city, right? And what kind of situation, like, you said world building, and like it's phenomenal, like, just seeing it everywhere, right? It's as much a part of this movie for me, the Harvey Dent stuff, as the Harvey Dent stuff is for Dark Knight. You know, like, I love these Harvey Dents kind of equally for different reasons, though, because as you pointed out, there's not much of Billy D. Williams in this, but man, all I ever want is to see him, like, get to come back to this role.
And the full intent of the scripts before Batman Returns did what Batman Returns did was for him to be Two-Face in the third film, which is why Two-Face is in that third film. He's just suddenly Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah, it's It's wild. But then like to go to Darkman, right? Darkman is what if the guy who got disfigured is the hero, quote unquote.
Right. Exactly.
Like it is like it's very much that. And then you look at something like the Ninja Turtles where they're like, man, that Batman movie, they gave a lot of time to the Joker. Maybe the Shredder's just a guy they're fighting. He doesn't need like an origin story. He doesn't need.
I think they do what really good turtle stories do, and that's take the thing that we all now know, right? Like the dark villain character, and flip it on its head. And like they do some really ridiculous stuff with Shredder in that movie, because that's the one where he's like got the kid army and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some really wild shit they do with it, and I think it's in direct response to some of this silly, like it wants to out silly this shit, and it does. I think it succeeds phenomenally with no, all parts due to Sam Rockwell. But like it's like it is a fantastic way to do your villain after seeing something like Batman.
Yeah. But but Jack Napier, Jack Nicholson in this movie is so good. And it is kind of his movie.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
He has the biggest arc of this film, and not necessarily like he comes to terms with himself, or like it doesn't resolve in a fun way or anything like that, but he does have a hell of a story from beginning to end of this. He is not the same man when he dies at the end of this film, right?
There's also the fact that like the Alexander Knox character, Robert Wool, and I'm a huge Robert Wool fan. You want to know the biases of Devin Decker in terms of Batman. Love me some Robert Wool. The fact that he's a main character on American Dad and he's always judging competitions and eating potato salad, 2 thumbs up from this corner. But his character of Alexander Knox, he's weirdly looking like it might be his movie at the start of this film. Like, it's about him. Like, he's Jack McGee hunting for the Incredible Hulk. But he's, like, not just the Author Exby, but he's also kind of the one telling the story to the audience.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
He's dumping exposition for you, right? Like, he's... But there is this kind of thing about him as a character that I always kind of remember him as being dopey, but then I watch the movie and he's not that dopey. But like he just, I don't know if it's the way he plays that character or if it's the archetype of that character just kind of bleeding through for me. But like I always expect him to be a little bit of a Keystone Cop kind of idiot, right?
Yeah, no,
but he's not that bad.
It's the problem lives and dies by, I mean, look at that mirror, more like Bruce Wayne. And it's just like, Alex, you had me. And then you did a pun to try to impress Vicky Vale. And yep, you're done. You're done in the movie now. Bye. Thanks for hanging out. I mean,
oh man.
But also, we know that the Turtles movie was being worked on like alongside this one. Is that one of the reasons why April O'Neil is a reporter in it? Like, because it was being also developed independently of the cartoon show. So the fact that she works at Channel 6 was not in Steve Barron's mind. But then it's like one of these situations where like, oh, it's how we can have exposition happen. But rather than have the dopey
again, like I said, early
guy,
copies of the script had kind of been out, right? Yeah. And so like there's kind of like back and forth about what characters were who in it, but the idea of there being like a reporter female love interest could have easily been in earlier versions of the script that the Turtles guys are influenced by when they then write their stuff, for sure. Yeah, because like I said, like Turtles is looking at all of this stuff that's going on in cinema and trying to just be kind of goofy with it. Like I don't want to call it a spoof, but it kind of is, which is kind of to the heart of what the Turtles always was, right?
It started out as a Daredevil spoof. Right. And anyone who tells you differently is selling something.
That's interesting. It starts out as a Daredevil spoof and then becomes like a Batman spoof. It's that
but the Turtles were being carried by, I don't know, like the person who gets hit by in the eyes in the Turtle books, in their eyes, was Matt Murdock. But then also you have Stick is Splinter, and the hand become the foot.
The foot, right?
Like it's all about that. And then for them to be influenced by Batman, it's weird how much what DC was doing was weirdly influencing the like grimdark stuff in the comics, and then even as it lightened up, right?
Yeah.
It's This is such an interesting intersection of popular culture that Batman 1989 represents. And here's the thing that I will say is this is a film that I grew up with, right? Undeniably grew up with this film. Watching it today, I was just reminded of how fucking good this movie is.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really well done movie. And I can't believe that it was only made for $35 million.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I mean, especially when you look at like some of the makeup stuff going on with the Joker and some of the effects stuff that you have to have with like with all of the choreography and all that shit. Like, this is not a cheap movie. And didn't it blow up? Wasn't it only supposed to be like, if I remember this correctly, like $28 million or like $30 million, and then it blew up to 35 or something like that?
It was lower than the 35. I don't know the exact figure, but it going up to 35. I mean, they were nervous. This was one of those movies that they're like, this is going to financially ruin us. Batman, like, what have we done? Because in addition to comic books people getting the copy of the script and talking about the script and all of the influences that they had to get the movie made, the announcement that Michael Keaton, Mr. Mom, was going to be Batman did not sit well with the community.
Well, even Tim Burton with his Pee-wee's Big Adventure being like the big one that everybody kind of clocked him for, right? Like even though Beetlejuice doesn't really do him many favors either in the regard of directing a Batman movie. You know what I mean? Like, I love Beetlejuice, but like, if the only two movies I had ever seen from this guy had just been Beetlejuice and fucking Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and then they said they were making Batman, I'd expect something like, you know, like the Adam West Batman. Like, I don't know. I can't say whether or not I'd be disappointed at the time. I don't know. But I would at least, in my head, that's what I would think you were saying. I would not expect this.
Yeah,
but you're so right that this becomes definitive for Burton. It's just, at the time, just so unexpected.
I mean, not only that, it's really interesting how everybody is mad about Michael Keaton. And if there is one defining legacy of Batman in cinema, it is people being disappointed about who was playing Batman. And that is front and center. Michael Keaton. What do you mean Val Kilmer's taking over for Michael Keaton? Wait, the ER guy, George Clooney? Christian Bale? Who the fuck is that?
You know, the big one with Christian Bale that I remember, the really gross shit with Christian Bale that I remember is people being like, it should be an American.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Whoa, what?
That was weird. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a lot. Yeah, people had a lot of issues with the fact that I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
And
man.
then don't get me started on Batfleck, right? That hashtag Batfleck when Batman when Ben Affleck was introduced. I love Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck took that one back, I gotta say.
Yeah.
But
God, I love Ben Affleck as Batman. Gosh.
I love Batfleck. I hashtag love Batfleck. I have always lamented that he did not get a proper Batman movie of his own.
Yeah.
You know, because like there's just too much bullshit with all of his other appearances to like really just sit back and appreciate him in it. You know what I mean? And that is so unfortunate because he deserves it.
Yeah. We a conversation that I remember as far back as I can in our friendship.
Also Pattinson. We're not gonna let you off the hook.
We're not gonna Robert Pattinson, yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is the discussion of who's the best Batman and who's the best Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Undeniably, I mean, Michael Keaton, I love him. I love this movie. I love what he does. Terrible Bruce Wayne. But part of that also comes from the fact that he's not the, like, rich Bruce Wayne. Like, it's just the fact that his father was a prominent doctor. There was no Wayne Industries or anything like that.
Yeah, like you do get kind of you definitely get the impression he's rich, right?
Yeah,
like,
he's definitely rich.
Not that he's it's not that he's not rich, but you don't get this impression that he's like a Scrooge McDuck like overlord. You know what I mean? Like you know, I just learned recently that Scrooge McDuck owns all of the land in Duckburg and lets everybody rent from him. We're not going to talk.
So
about this
did you
here.
just not watch the 2017 series? Because that's like a big plot point with the Beagle Boys.
No, I'm in the middle of rewatching it, and
Yeah.
and I was reminded of it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, like I said, we're not talking about this here. But yeah, so there is a little bit of that. I do have to. So here's the thing. This conversation that you're talking about, who's the best Batman, who's the best Bruce Wayne, that had always in my circles been caveated with the understanding that Keaton is the best at both. Who do you think comes next? Right? Like that had always kind of been the thing, is that like we all know that Michael Keaton is phenomenal as both, so we're not gonna bring him into this one. But other than that, who do you think is the best Batman and the best Bruce Wayne, right? Like, and that kind of shit. And so it's interesting to me that you didn't seem to get that caveat, because man, that was always on the line.
That caveat never came up. It was always, who is the best Batman, who is the best Bruce Wayne, and I
love him as Bruce. Oh, God, I love him as Bruce though. He's so like it's the scene for me is the scene in Vicky's apartment, right? Like when he has to act crazy, and then the whole reveal of the pan under his shirt stuff. I'm a sucker for that scene, right? And so that's what it is, plain and simple. There is my bias on the table.
I mean, my favorite Bruce Wayne scene in this movie is when he is following Knox and Vale going into the armory, like just fucking dunking on him. Like, man, Bruce Wayne's a fucking idiot. And he's just sitting there, and then he just puts like, oh, it's a Japanese. Oh, and how do you know? I bought it in Japan. Like, that's such good Bruce Wayne.
Yes. Yeah,
like,
see, man? I love it, man. I really do. I like this idea that he is not a natural Bruce, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, I get that. Like, he's a weird pull, but you know what? I felt the same way about Robert Pattinson. Yeah. And like, I'm not saying I was discouraged by him playing the role. I was very curious to see what it would turn out like, because it's just not what I would clock him as. And fuck me, it turned out great, right? Like, I think the secret to this conversation is that there's actually anybody can do it, right? It's just that like the best ones are the ones that really bring something to it. I think the thing about Clooney in Batman and Robin, right? And I will point to him specifically because fuck it, he's super successful in the world. What does he care what I think about his acting in this one particular film?
Now like, you bring up Return of the Killer Tomatoes. Lock your doors.
He's got something to say. But this idea that like he feels like he's phoning it in. You know, as Bruce, he's so natural as Bruce that like you kind of forgive him for phoning it in, and he does this in a lot of movies. Like, I fucking love the dude, but when George Clooney can come onto a set and just be George Clooney, it's like a sigh of relief for him, and he just be himself, and we love him for it. That's why he's George Clooney. But this is one of those movies, right, where he's just like, as Bruce Wayne, fucking fit, great. You put him in a bat suit, and he just doesn't know what to do. He's just like, I don't know. Here's my credit card, says the script. Did I really say that? Like,
do I really have a like did I apply for a credit? Did I have to give them my social security number? Does American Express know that I'm Bruce Wayne?
Why does the card say Batman?
Well, so honestly, I can explain that one. It's the fact that he's just an authorized user on Bruce Wayne's account. And what do you want the card to read, Mr. Wayne? Can it read Batman? Yeah, sure thing. You're a black card member.
Yeah, whatever, sir. Whatever.
Forever, Val Kilmer was one of my favorite Bruce Waynes. And I know that's so weird, and people are like so weird when I say that, but I love what he does.
He's a great Batman. He just seems so uncomfortable when he was Bruce Wayne, and I think that's on purpose.
I think that's on purpose. I think that's the whole thing. Is that at that point he wants to be Batman forever.
Yeah, I don't want to watch my Batman look like he wants to crawl out of his own skin for 2 hours. That's not that. Well, I say that, and I loved Robert Pattinson, but no, that was a joke. I get you. But like watching him,
that was
Bruce
in Twilight.
Wayne
that doesn't count.
Made me not want him to be Bruce Wayne, and you know what I mean? Like he's imposing that thought on me.
So I mean, the weird thing about this Bruce Wayne that Michael Keaton is portraying, though, this turned into a whole Batman thing. I'm really sorry, people. This is
this is what we're here to talk about, because we're not talking about the Flash. This is what we're doing to honor this movie and its legacy.
Yeah. So it's so nobody knows who the fuck Bruce Wayne is in this movie, which is the other reason why it's like, how long has he been doing it? Because he's clearly new to the double life. And regardless of how Keaton chose to play the role with like this guy who's like, yeah, I'm Batman. Like, I mean, he's saying it all the time. He's like, all right, here's your change, sir. Thank you. I'm Batman. Shut up. What are you...
By the way, I'm Batman. Jesus.
Who is Batman? Who is that? What are you talking about?
What is Batman? Nothing. It's fine. You'll get the joke later. Bye.
You'll understand it one day. It's just because the fact that like it's also a great scene when Vicky Vale's like, "Hi, do you know where I could find Bruce Wayne?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't fucking know where you can find." It's like, that's so weird because he's like this weird recluse who never leaves his house. In this movie, like he's not billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne.
No, yeah.
He hasn't adopted the Bruce Wayne identity yet in this film.
Right. Well, and so that's something that we see, especially in the Nolan movies, right? Just to keep referencing those, but like that idea that the character that you're talking about, Playboy Bruce Wayne, like that kind of thing that he isn't in this, we know that is a persona that he kind of puts on. That's not who Bruce Wayne really is. And so in that idea that this is also a very new Batman, he's also a very new Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. And it's
right. Like it's wild.
It's wild that he sleeps with Vicky Vale on their first date. Like
it was the 80s.
It was the 80s. Fucking AIDS, man. We were terrified to have casual sex in 1989. No, it's not that. I mean, especially in Gotham City. Come on.
God, we're not doing that. We're not doing that.
No, but it's just one of those situations where it's like he is not thinking at all about the duality of being Bruce Wayne and being Batman. Like letting her in and it's so strange, but it's so compelling as well. And the only thing that like really spits in the stew is that she is fucking gone before the next movie. Like, what happens? You are someone out there who knows who Batman is.
Yeah. So like there's also, again, going back to the cardinal rule thing, right? Like just all this stuff about him just telling everybody that he's Batman. Wild that he just admits this. Like more than one person in this movie figures it out.
Yes, that
it's nuts, and it's just like, okay.
Oh, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Come on.
Right. Oh man, and then you get that scene. It's just so good. Like when he just pretends to be crazy, right? And I love it because like it shows that he has that ability to do that. And I think the scene that you were talking about, where he's like following them around, I think that's him at his most real. That is like the completely like neutered like Bruce bot that he puts different suits over in order to become these different things in his life, which is like such a great core Batman thing to put into this movie, of like this idea that Batman is just so broken that he may not even be like a quote unquote man anymore. And like it's a huge thing in his story is to try and figure out all these different aspects about himself. So one of my favorite things about the Snyder run is Scott Snyder, when he wrote the Court of Owls story, is like this whole thing about Bruce like looking within himself to like figure out like why he's even doing this, right? Is like that is such a core Batman story to tell, and the ways in which they tell it in this movie without throwing it in your face are phenomenal.
Yeah, that's very true. Gosh, he has so many cameras in his house. He has so many cameras in his house.
I mean, it kind of lends into the bit in Dark Knight with the whole fucking cell phone thing, right?
Yeah.
It hit me like a brick when I was watching that. I was like, oh man, they just kind of really lean into this whole like what's the word I'm looking for?
Surveillance
police state Batman.
Police state, yeah.
Yeah, like like the ways in which he's just willing to go that far, you know, and in this one they don't really address it, right? Like it's just part of what he does in the house. And to be fair, it is in his own property so much. It's not like in Dark Knight where it's the cell phone thing, but I do love in that one where they do the whole like he hands the keys over to Fox, right, and just walks away.
Yeah.
It was just a really cool like kind of echo that I didn't realize existed.
Yeah, that scene though, where it's like the 3 cameras behind the mirror lead to thousands of screens. All right, we're an hour into this episode. We have to talk about the thing that always bothers me about this movie.
Okay, let's do it.
Does Prince exist in this universe? And if so, did the Joker hire him to write 2 unique songs just for him?
I think the answers are yes, 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 man. Like,
Okay.
I think that is the only way that this whole bit makes any fucking sense. You talked about the Joker kind of getting a little fourth wall breaky at the end, and I didn't even really ever clock it as that, but you're totally right. And now, like, I'm seeing this is just another moment of that, right?
Yeah, like that music, those songs are not songs that exist in the world. This is the Joker. Like, I love this Purple. You know who else loves Purple? Freaking the guy from Purple Rain. I wonder how much money to have him, like, record some songs for me.
Well, and like to that point, what it probably is Prince is like, I'll be in your movie, but you don't get anything in my music.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, that is a definitive thing where he's like, oh yeah, I'd love my songs to be in the Batman movie. And they're like, yeah, motherfucking little red Corvette. And he's like, I will write new songs for your Batman movie. And they're like, no, that's not what we want. He's like, that is how you will get my songs in your Batman movie.
Late, the contract is signed.
I will be writing 6 original songs for your Batman movie. I am Prince. Hear me roar. Yeah, because those moments are awesome. The moment where they go to the Flugelheim Museum,
Yeah,
it's called the Flugelheim. First of all, like Tim Burton, just at the most Tim Burton that he gets to be.
I'm
in this
losing
film.
my shit talking about this movie. I cannot believe, like, I adore this film. I really do. But man, I have just the ways in which this film has just endured through all of the like culture that at least I have consumed is fucking buck wild.
I know. I can't believe how connected I was to this film in this viewing, where I'm just like, this is still working. Lawrence is carrying a huge fucking boombox, and it is playing a Prince song that like has to have been written for this moment.
I mean, and you're talking about the scene, right? This is the moment with like the balloons and shit, right? Like
No.
like,
I'm the one that I'm talking about is at the museum where he
oh,
calls
the,
up
yeah,
Vicky
when he crashes the museum
to be
and then he has
like,
the boombox bit going.
hello,
Yes.
I'm Bruce Wayne. I'd like to meet you at the museum for dinner because for some reason there's a restaurant in the museum. I'll see you there at 7 p.m. Thank you. And
Are
then,
you making fun of the museum restaurant? Because that is a thing.
I know that it's it
Yeah,
does
I've been
not
to
feel
good-
like it would be
I
a
have been in
thing.
more than one good museum restaurant.
You've been to snack bars, Sejohn. No, it is the weird thing about it is that museum just looks like a vault. It does not look like the type of museum that would have a restaurant in it.
Well, the weirder thing is like it looks so small.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's supposed to be this big art museum in the middle of Gotham City, you know, for all intents and purposes like New York, right? Like it's supposed to be this big thing. And then like it's just this one little room that it looks like just like a hallway and it's just it was and I get that there's other rooms that we're not seeing, but like it felt so enclosed, so weirdly. It felt like a studio set. I think that's what we're getting at, right?
I mean, it's the same studio set that they used for a museum in The Phantom in 1996 when they go to get the Jade Skull.
That's so cool.
If it's not the same set, it is so similar.
Yeah. Well, there's a really famous hallway that is used in a ton of movies, and famously is the one that in The Matrix they fucking just wreck the shit out of. That hallway that in The Matrix is tiled in black, but it's, you know, it's a movie set. They're made to change that shit. But it's that big one where they're like doing all of the flips and shit through the pillars and killing all the security guards. That hallway is like in a ton of movies. Apparently it was like a big thing for the Wachowskis to get to work on it, and like that is the kind of thing. Like I was watching this movie and I saw that, and the first thought I had was, I wonder if that's the hallway. Like this is so clearly just a standard set. Like you talk about how they suddenly like this movie was just suddenly going over budget, right? I have to wonder if something like this moment feeling a little off is like a result of something like that, right?
Yeah. I don't know. That whole museum scene though is so good. And the way that they destroy the paintings, but then the guy who takes the bust and paints the hair green and gives it the Joker look, like it's such a great sequence. And it is punctuated by this song that Prince was like, I'll take your money. I don't care that you're killing people. And like that's why
It's the impression if Prince is in this world and Joker has two songs from them. I'd like to think that maybe Prince didn't do it willingly. Maybe
you say that, but I think he is pure chaotic neutral.
okay. I like that he might possibly be in Batman's rogue gallery.
Right? I could see it. I could totally see it. I mean, they're artists, right? They work together. There's an intelligence to this Joker that I really love, like the aptitude for art, science, and chemistry. So the fact that, like, yes, the products are bad, but it's only a combination of the products that will kill you, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's this weird idea that like he's insane, but like he's not wrong, and I don't mean that on like a large scale.
No,
I mean
yeah.
like moment to moment. Like he's completely off his fucking rocker, but also there is not a point where he says any of that shit and is like by the standards of this film, he is not incorrect, right? Like it's this weird idea, like you said, it's an intelligence that they give him in this one that is not missing from the other ones, but not displayed in this way. Like this is wild.
He's calculating. Calculating would be the adjective to describe what he is doing and how he is doing it. Like,
yeah, and you get some of that with like Heath Ledger, but the idea is that you never see it. You just get the impression that is what's going on. Famously he was kind of hugely influenced by Nicholson at the time, right? Like it was one of the big things that like his thing was he was very into what Nicholson had done, and you can see some of that in what he chooses to do. But like there's still kind of a chaotic nature to what he's doing in that movie compared to what Nicholson's doing here. And then you think about, I'm trying to think of like other versions of the Joker to really reference, and there's not many, but like, not many that are on this kind of level. But like some of the animated ones and the ways that they've done, I think of like the ones in, I say the ones because there's more than one in the, what's the Mortal Kombat line that now is like a whole comic series and stuff too?
Oh, Injustice,
right? Like I think about Injustice Joker and stuff like that, and like there's such an evil to him that he kind of outwit himself because he'd rather do the more evil thing than the smarter thing sometimes. And I don't think that's true with this Joker. I think this Joker would always rather do the smarter thing in the moment so that he can get away with it and then live to be evil another day. I don't think maliciousness is the end goal. I just think it's a fun tool in his arsenal for him.
Yeah, look at how quickly Gotham devolves when like any of these products could potentially be fatal to you, and really what he's done to sow that much terror. Because he's a terrorist. At the end of the day, this version of the Joker is definitely a terrorist. But what he does to sow so much terror.
Is there a version of the Joker that you wouldn't classify as one?
I think that there are some Jokers who are like gangsters. Like they're just criminals.
I guess if you wanted to go with like Detective Comics and just focus on some of the low level stuff, but like fuck me.
No,
man.
No, I mean,
as far as I'm concerned, if you're talking about the Joker, we're talking about a domestic terrorist.
It was either my senior year or your senior year of college when they did the book where it was revealed that like through his actions, the Joker was responsible for the death of at least 1 million people, and the whole discussion of like, at what point do you realize that like he is something that needs to be stopped for good? Right. Was like a big comic line that was happening. And it's like eventually, and I would not be surprised if it was big influence from something like this. Because there's also like serial killer Joker. Because like in The Killing Joke, that Joker, I don't think he's at terrorist level yet. Because it's not like everybody is a victim.
You're talking about a more intimate Joker to get really gross about it. But like, hey, we're talking about Alan Moore, so let's do it. But like that idea that he's much more close range in those kinds of stories, right? Yeah. When he starts to get kind of big brain, like it starts to do some of the world bending shit. Like that's when you would really class it. Yeah, it's interesting to me that you wanted to couch that. Like I think it was safe for you to just call him a terrorist. I don't think you needed to couch it.
No. Well, definitively in this film, he is a terrorist. I don't think
Right.
that Jared Leto's Joker and the things that we see from him in Suicide Squad, he's more of like a gangster murderer. Like
Sure.
he's not acting as a terrorist. But Dark Knight, Heath Ledger, definitely a terrorist.
Right.
I mean, the Joker.
I just think like George Romero,
Yeah.
like way back in the day, right? Did I
Yeah.
get the name right? I got the name right.
Yeah,
didn't
George Romero. Yes. No, Cesar Romero.
Cesar.
George Romero's the guy who did the zombie movies. Cesar
That's
Romero's the one who refused to shave his mustache so you could see his mustache through the makeup.
And I think it became a part of that character, and I love it so.
Yeah. Oh, I
But
mean, it's like
even like he does some pretty heinous shit in what is an otherwise goofy ass show.
exactly. I mean, but it's so campy that like it's not forgivable.
On the
But
school
like
bus.
you don't
did
focus
what?
on you.
God.
But you don't focus on it the same way that in this movie where he's like, yes, I'm the good guy, and then I'm releasing a toxic gas that will murder everybody here right now.
No, you said it, man. He's calculating. He's a
he is.
very like thought out Joker, like in a way that we kind of always think of the Joker as being. But now that you've pointed it out, I don't think many of them show us that side of themselves very often, like he does, like Nicholson's does.
Yeah, they focus more on the insanity of the character, and then it's just like, oh, and I guess he lucked into a good plot, and it's like, no, like he's crazy, but that doesn't mean that he's stupid.
Well, I think what it is, and this is going to give too much credit to too many people, but I'll do it anyway. But it's this idea that we have come to really kind of look at the Joker as something that also represents something like chaos, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about something very meticulous, and I think that that is a totally fair way to look at somebody like the Joker. And there are ways that that has been done, and that has been really cool. But I think what you're coming up against is that there's another side of this character that people like to focus on, and that is this idea of pure chaos. So this idea that he lucks into a good plot fits right into the theory of chaos, right? This idea that this guy has decided to just throw himself literally into the wind and just see if what happens, and he just so happens to be the lucky bastard that got to fly, right? Like it's this crazy kind of dichotomy of this character, because like I think there's a lot of debate to be had, and I'm sure often is had in certain spaces, about like, is the Joker sane or not, right? Is he like calculating, like you're talking about, kind of implies a level of more down to earthness than I think a lot of people really think of when they talk about the Joker, right? And in that, it does mean that there is some of that chaotic, anything can happen, everything good happens to him nature, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, they also do touch on the fact that like he's prone to bouts of mood swings and irrational acts. Like the really cool thing is that Batman, because there's a lot of Detective Batman in this film still, right?
Yeah.
As much as there is also a little bit of Frank Miller, I'm gonna blow up this chemical factory that's full of people. Like, fuck you, that's what I have to do. There is also that when he is just sitting there kind of like mouth agape watching the woman die on the news, and then the Joker do his whole Joker products, they'll put a smile on your face, is like, Batman, you should be doing something. You should not be just sitting there watching it like, you know,
get off your ass, man.
Say what you will about the guy. He's clearly a murderer, but the production value, Alfred. The production value.
Yeah, man, this movie gets real fucked up, man.
Yeah. And then he's like, all right, nope, let's go shopping, Alfred. Like, what? It's like, on the one level, yes, that's the type of things that Batman does. Batman sees a problem, he'll solve it. Check out the beat while my butler revolves it. But
Really resolves it. But yes.
But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, he's going to try to figure out how these products are killing people. Because as much as it's the chaos aspect of it, where now everybody lives in fear of, is your deodorant going to be what kills you today? Like, we need to figure out what it is, how it's doing it, and a solution for it.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, the solution is, I'll bring Vicky Vale to the Batcave. Stupid Batman. And then give her the file to be like, you need to give this to the press. Like,
Yeah.
How does she get home from there?
Yeah, like I like getting a little bit of Detective Batman. I know that he ends up kind of doing some bonehead stuff, but like you've already given me the excuse, Dev. This is a very early Bruce Wayne Batman. He's making mistakes.
Yes, and that's okay
That's
because
my favorite Batman.
he learns from those mistakes.
Yeah.
Just
It really
like
is my favorite Batman. Like if you think about like my favorite Batman movies, it's Batman '89 is somewhere in the Nolan trilogy. I won't pick one right now, but one of those three, right? And then like
Trajan,
definitely the latest one,
how
the Batman, right?
I thought you would have chosen the obvious choice.
I love that movie. I gotta be honest. Give all the shit in the world, it deserves it. I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but boy, do I love that movie.
Oh yes, I agree. It's a lovely
I
movie.
agree.
It is a movie that like I thought I was never gonna see, and then I saw it.
Sorry,
I saw The Dark Knight Rises and immediately watched it again. Like it was one of those movies where I'm like, I need to watch that movie again. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's probably, if I had to say like favorites, it's that one. And weirdly, just all of Ben Affleck's scenes from the Schneider cut really do something for me. Like he
I mean, I know. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you not to feel your feelings. I cannot get past disappointment when I see some of that stuff.
No, I
he is great. It's just all I can ever see is just the potential of what could have been, you know?
Well, when I think of the potential of what could have been, I just watched Daredevil. God, I loved Daredevil. Daredevil was a movie that, like, he was so good as Matt Murdock, too.
Cut.
What?
Yeah. Speaking of a movie with the director's cut, we should talk about someday.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, we're getting there. We're leading up to the 20th anniversary of Daredevil, and we'll talk. Don't worry, everybody. We're gonna talk. We got plenty of episodes of This Day Report to come. This one's supposed to be about Batman. Talking about the parade scene. That is the lamest fucking parade ever. It is 2 floats, and one of them is just spotlights. And you know what? Fuck the Joker and his whole, why didn't you tell me he had one of those things? You have a freaking branded helicopter. Fuck off. He only has the Batwing because you have the helicopter.
Man.
I love that it's the stupid the line grip. That is, where does he get those wonderful toys? Because you always think it's gonna be the freaking Batwing, because that's one of those situations where like, where the fuck did he get that?
I mean, or at least the grappling hook, right? But
it's like,
that's the Ben Moritz, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, when he shoots them up to escape from LaFours, and where did you get those wonderful toys? And he kisses him. Oh.
It's one of the best kisses in cinema history.
Easily top 3. But that whole sequence, and I always am waiting in that moment for those people. Is he giving out real money? Because I think it would just be so great if you look at it and it was his face on those bills.
You hope it's not? Oh, I was going to say, I think it would be right up his alley for it to be real money.
No, like it would be right up his...
We were talking about him not being chaotic, right? But he is prone to these like fits in these outbursts, right? I think what it is there is a line for him. If you're part of the plan, you are safe for now. Not, like not true. Like at any moment, the part of the plan could be you being gone. But like, if you're part of the plan, he's not gonna do that, right? But if you're anywhere that does not affect his plan, you're fucking fair game in his mind, right? So I think there is like this chaos in him, and I think he kind of weirdly, to your point about how intelligent he is, knows that's in him. So he gives himself like this line of, these are the people you can't touch right now, and then these are the people that don't matter. Like, and just like to talk about how fucking scary he really is, right?
It's sad when he kills Bob Friendly. It is sad when he kills Bob Friendly. Because Bob, first of all, we haven't even touched on the fact that Curly himself from City Slickers is in this as Carl Grissom. Jack Palance as the mob boss that Jack Napier is like the right-hand man of, while also fucking his young trophy wife, is so good. Like,
well, him and Jack Nicholson get to have a sneer off.
Yeah. It's so good. But then he does that whole thing where he's like, Jack, you're my number one guy. I need you on this. And then when he mirrors that with Bob, it's like, this is the first time that I realized That is a joke for him and him alone. We as the audience were there. Nobody else was present for him to make that reference. It is like any joke that I tell on the Say Report that nobody gets but me. Bob, you're my number one guy. And he's like, he fucking loses his shit over it. And it's like, nobody knows what you're talking about at all except for you and me in the audience. But like, in this moment, you look fucking nuts. And
Holy
it is
shit.
weirdly
Is Jack Nicholson
calculated.
the original Deadpool?
What?
Is Jack Nicholson the original Deadpool?
I mean, the fact of the matter is Deadpool isn't even the quote-unquote original Deadpool. Characters who acted the way that he did. She-Hulk is a really big influence on it. And the way that like Jack Nicholson acts in this movie, with the fact that it has been written into Batman comics since this film, that the Joker is aware that he is in a created world of a comic book.
Yeah, isn't that like one of the many contentious like stories about the Joker? Because there's just tons, not just origin stories, just like things he has done and not done, right? But like this idea that like at some point his insanity was born from his realization that he was in a comic book, which is just fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's like, I realize that this world doesn't fucking matter. Like, it's, I'm just a plaything in this world, and nobody else is in on the joke. It's
well,
like,
see, and you know what that reads too much like for me, though, is that really Alan Moore, like, so Alan Moore in writing Watchmen originally for, the rumor is, I guess, but he wanted to use actual DC characters in that story, right? And it's like you can see like the one-for-ones, right? But even with that idea removed, you can see the influences and like the idea of the comedian in that what you're talking about with the Joker starts to read way too much like Alan Moore and what he ends up doing with the comedian. This whole bit of like how this guy is just kind of in on this like joke that it all doesn't matter, and he, and it's what drives him insane, and it makes him worse and worse as the years go by, and like it's just this like it's this dreary Alan Moore style story. I've complained about my things with Moore before, but respect for what it is. I love the Watchmen story. I cannot deny that, as much as I hate how tropey in the Alan Moore sense it can be. But like, that's where that belongs for me. I don't want that in my Joker. Maybe that's starting to sound a little too like I want my thing to be my thing, god damn it. But which is not fair, right? We always talk about that. But like, but it's just not what I want from Joker, I guess.
Let's talk about that line, right? Is with a character like Joker, who has existed almost since the beginning, right? I'm trying to think of when the first issue is. The 1965 keeps jumping into my head, but I think even that might be too late. But like there was a time where the Joker was not heavily connected to Batman in the comic books. Mm-hmm. Like it was I can't think of his name, but the guy who was always one step ahead of Batman, Johnny something. And it's just like there was this time before the rogues galleries sort of became supernatural and superpowered, where Batman was just dealing with like common level thugs. That's all the Joker was at that point. And then over the years, as the Joker has been written and reinterpreted, like, you're allowed to have a preference for a Joker. You saying that you don't like a Joker who's like had this existential crisis and realized that his whole life is someone else's fiction, like, that's fine. I don't think you're saying, it's when you come down with that and say, I never want that Joker, right? Like, that's where you're like, that's a little gatekeeping, man.
I don't want other people to have that Joker. Yeah. You can't do that. You can say, I don't want that Joker. You can say, I don't want that Joker for the rest of your life. The second that you start saying, I so don't want that Joker that I want it to just not be available to anyone, no, you don't get to say that.
No, you're that's not allowed. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but you're also not wrong about the comedian going that way. But then what's even like one step removed from that is the fact that Peacemaker was going to be the comedian.
Yeah.
Before he became an original character in the comedian. So like, would Peacemaker have been the type of person to have that existential crisis, and if for to make any sense, or by making him the comedian is he able to like have all those comments about jokes, and then the way that he says my life's a joke, do you suddenly connect it to somebody like the Joker?
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's, I mean, like I said, by the time Moore gets to where he gets with that, it's all influences, right?
Yeah.
So it could be both characters are in there, right? Like, I think that's where it's coming from because there's a lot that goes on with the comedian about how much he really is, in the end, the villain, right? Like,
Yeah.
surprise for that movie, I guess. I don't know. But like, but this idea that this character just goes on to influence this stuff, and we do see darker explorations of this, and I like seeing those darker explorations. It's just that at the end of the day, like there's a certain like I don't know if we talked about this or not, but I have not seen Todd Phillips the Joker. I know a lot about it because nobody could stop talking about it for a long time. And to its credit, it won an Oscar or something, didn't it? Like it's like a it's like a huge success of a comic book film, and I have so little interest in it that I've just never seen it. But to the point we were making earlier, never begrudge anybody that has seen it. It's just not what I want from my Joker. Like, there's all this weird stuff that happens in that movie that I just don't love. Not least of which, like, this weird way in which it tries to, like, turn his story into a sympathetic one. And I know a lot of people would say, like, if you see sympathy in that story, there's something wrong with you. But, like, by the very nature of it being a narrative about him, it has to lend a sympathetic eye to him from in moments in order for like you to get to the next moment, right? By the end, you can still say, oh, no, I feel nothing for this man, but like I don't want to engage in the conversation in the first place, I guess is what I'm saying, right?
I mean, also, like, I saw that movie after driving back. Like, you can listen to the episode Joker, the Jexy, the Joker, and the competition that wasn't. Like, I had gone down to a game competition. It ended up not being, like, it got delayed, and it's just like, you know what, I don't want to spend my time here. So we went and saw the Jexy, and then we drove.
We really give enough time to Jexy that it got a title credit?
It got a title credit, yeah. A movie that I bet nobody remembers. At all.
Adam Devine or something, right?
Adam Devine, that's correct. I mean, it's an interesting film. Rose Byrne plays the AI.
Right.
And then I went from that film to, like, we drove home and I saw a midnight showing of The Joker. And it's like, and it was such a weirdly influential thing. So it's not like a movie that I was in, like, all of my wits when I saw. But I will say this. If you see that movie and you don't feel sympathetic for the Joker, the movie failed in its messaging.
That's it, right? Like you can tell me all you want about how it's the Joker, you're not supposed to feel blah blah blah. I feel like Todd Phillips really wants me to feel sympathy for the Joker. Like, I don't want to put words in the man's mouth, but he has almost outright said things about like, no, I see him as a sympathetic character. It's like, what?
Right. And even if, spoilers for the Joker movie, like, all of those sympathetic moments you see end up to be a little bit of gaslighting of you as the viewer, it doesn't change the fact that in the moment he's presented as a sympathetic character.
Right.
Like, and then the twist is that, Bruce Willis is his father. Like, it,
and he's been dead the entire time.
Yes. You took it the step further. But yeah, it's just one of those things that it works. And even weirdly, like, the Joker in this movie has some of those moments where, like, this isn't what he wanted. This isn't where he thought his life was going to go. Yeah, he was a gangster and he was banging his boss's wife, but, like, I don't think he thought hideous deformity and, like, an even thinner grasp of, like, reality and sanity than what he possessed at the beginning of the film was, like, you don't want to wish that on anybody.
Right. Like, the whole hard change and all of that. Yeah, man, it's fucking, yeah, it's wild. And it goes back to some of the stuff that we were saying about with, like, Burton kind of wanting you to see Joker and Batman as, like, two very broken people, like, in this whole thing about, like, what happens to them and the fact that they create each other, and then that's the bit at the end of the movie. Like, it's such a interesting way to play these characters at this point, right? Like it's really not what you think of with these two characters. Like, at this time, you're seeing things like The Killing Joke, just to go back to Alan Moore, right? And, like, as much as there is, like, this weird bit in that story about their connection and their ability to connect, and about how they may be the only two people that can connect with each other in this entire fucking city, is like literally the, like, laugh line at the end of that horrible story, right? Is like you see some of that there, but they're still two separate entities who are against one another. Like there is never a moment where you believe that Batman like is dealing with some of the same like trauma that the Joker is, right? Whereas in this one, in Burton's, like they are so intricately tied to one another, they might as well go to counseling together, right?
Yeah, they would need to go to coupling. They would need to go to counseling together because there's no way that they would make any progress without the psychiatrist actually seeing that this other person exists, and yes, this is how they act.
Money. I would pay sweet cash to see the Harvey the Harley Quinn show do an episode where she ties the two of them down and works with them.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be hilarious.
It'd be hilarious. It'd be a level to think. I mean, like, here's the other really insane thing. If you're going to tie the two of them together the way that Burton does, in the beginning of this film, when Batman is at Axis Chemicals and Jack goes over the bar, he tries to save him. And as the film goes on, as he sees the depths of depravity that Joker represents and his crew, right? The Joker's goons, even in their goofy purple branded fucking like jackets, they're just as bad with the ways that they act and treat people. I mean, you can't be the Joker, but like they're not there for a fucking paycheck. They are acolytes of this guy. They are firmly in the camp of this is what we should be doing. Two, I mean, like, the fact that they all deform their faces in some way, which is, like, this really interesting thing. Like, Bob Friendly has that scar, or there's the guy whose lip is cut once he's now working for the Joker. I don't know if Lawrence has eyes. I think that might be what Lawrence did. Lawrence being the boombox guy, because I don't see anything else there, but he's always wearing those sunglasses. He takes them off, no eyes, just like Cool Spot.
You have a dark head canon sometimes. Like, we've talked about this. You got to keep that shit to yourself.
I'm sorry. I know that you have to sleep eventually again, Sejohn and the listener. But it's one of those things where, like, they add that, like, they show their dedication to him. It's the same thing with Alicia, allowing him to, like, burn her face with acid.
Right.
Like, it's, like, there's this weird thing where they're all acolytes of him in this way. But then Batman, along the same side, who is supposed to be better, right? By the end of the movie, he's willing to kill the Joker. He goes there with intent to kill the Joker for killing his parents. And that's an interesting thing when it's a know-nothing thug like fucking Victor Zsasz, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is something entirely different when it is the Joker. Regardless of if the Joker has been terrorizing Gotham for 30 years or 30 minutes. It is different if it is Batman in the suit, in the cowl, going to kill the Joker because of a personal vendetta.
They never really retcon that in any of the four 90s ones, right? Like I'm counting this as one of the 90s ones, I guess, but like they don't retcon that. Like they don't introduce Joe Till or something like that, right? Like Joe Chill. Sorry, that came out weird.
Yeah, no, it's I think I'm like running up against the issue of Batman Begins, it being so prevalent there.
Yeah, right.
No, it's the fact that his parents are dead is really only touched on in this movie. And then there's the brief in Batman Forever when Robin's family is killed, where the Graysons are killed. And he takes him in and he's like, I went through something similar and, I get it. Maybe I can help you through it. But it's never the level that we see in this film is like never reached.
Yeah, it's interesting. I only because of the mantra that we don't need to keep seeing the Waynes die. We actually don't see it that often. That's not true. There are a lot of other instances that people can point to, I'm sure. It's just that as often as you would think, it's interesting that we actually really only see it in this movie, and it's not a focus in this movie.
Right. We don't see it until like 3/4 of the way through the film. So much movie has happened. And it's weird. It is the weirdest retelling of the death of Batman's parents. Like, how a bummer indeed, but still. It is one of those situations where, like, it's not so much that his parents are killed. It's more the focus on the fact that it was young Jack Napier who did it. And that guy, I mean, Christian Slater exists in the world, right? Why is it not Christian Slater playing that role? Why is it some guy kind of done up to look like the Joker, even though he hadn't turned into the Joker yet?
Yeah, it's a weird reference to him later in life, I guess.
Like,
I think there, you know what it is like, I'm going to lay this, and we have not done this much with this movie, or as much as we should, because the man deserves credit as much as I'm going to give him blame here. But this is pure Tim Burton, right? Like, as I think we're seeing a dream sequence-esque memory in the style of a Tim Burton, right? And you see this kind of stuff play out in things like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and stuff like that, right? Where like there's this idea that because it's a displacement of time and memory, he's allowed to get wackier. I think would be like the best way to. It happens a bit in Pee-wee too, right?
Yeah, Pee-wee is what I'm thinking, like Large Marge. But then also when he remembers what happened, how his bike was stolen.
Right.
Like his
like,
recollection.
The second
of that.
that's out of place and time, he feels like he has free reign to play with it, right?
Right.
So that's what I would say about those scenes in particular.
Yeah, but but as an audience member, it like that's one of the more disturbing moments in the film.
Yeah,
and like
I said, man, it's a dark movie. Like it gets really, like it earns its PG-13. I think it really does solidly land that. It's wild to me to think about, like, kind of what that might mean for the future of film.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know, unfortunately.
Well,
like, imagine if we were having this discussion in 1989, right? We're suddenly Siskel and Ebert talking about what is this film being rated PG-13 with the gunfight and the deaths that we see on screen being rated PG-13 mean. Like, we're now so many years removed, 34 years later, looking at this film and we're like, that's exactly what it means.
Yeah.
Like that it's this film in 1989 becomes the profitability sweet spot. And we see that demonstrated by the follow-up to this film. And it's like, that was too far. That was too far that you took it. But then one of the other crazy things is that part of what makes that film so much more gruesome is that he does a lot of tell don't show. So like your imagination takes over for those moments that like are off screen in Batman Returns, which in turn makes everything worse.
Yeah, like the transformation of Michelle Pfeiffer, right? Oh man.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there anything else from Batman that we haven't touched on that you wanted to make sure we touched on?
There's too much. Like, there's so much going on, even in the background of this movie getting made. You know that Neil Gaiman cites getting to go see like the set one day as like one of the most influential things. Like, he was writing Sandman and it was doing really well. And so one of the treats that they gave him is they let him walk through the set. And the second he saw like the sets of Gotham, he was like, that's like sold to me. Like, I knew that Burton knew what he was doing. And then like he said, like it also it showed me what I could be doing with my comics, right? It really influenced him, and he said that's when he became much more like cinematic in like what he was envisioning on the page, and why we end up getting so many phenomenal screen adaptations of Gaiman's work, right? Because that's not always the case. A lot of writers, it's really hard to put them up there, right? Or it takes the right person to do it, right? But like Gaiman, it really does feel like it's like a playground playing with his shit, and he says that like a lot of where that comes from is like getting to see what happened with Batman, and it really just showed everybody that was writing comics at the time, like you could go places with this shit.
I mean, along that same line, this film won an Oscar, and that Oscar is for art direction, set decoration, because the world of Gotham in Batman '89 is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, all of the praise that I lavished upon Dick Tracy, because it is also incredible, like, leaps and bounds ahead of what Dick Tracy did in Batman. Like, it's weird that Dick Tracy comes after it and, like, is still visually striking and has all of this stuff, but at the same time is weirdly simplistic, and there are those moments where, like, this is clearly a soundstage, or this is clearly like set pieces in front of a piece of artwork,
Well,
right?
that's what I mean is like there's so much beauty in all of these moments, and then you get hit in the face in a moment where you're just like something's a little toned down here, right? And you have to wonder in those moments if this is when they start running up against that budget line.
Yeah, because I mean, like all of the Gotham Square, where like that's like the central focus of the plot is the fact that like we have to have the 200th anniversary of the birth of Gotham City so that we can rejuvenate the dying downtown Gotham Square and bring
Right.
back all the businesses, which like that's also a really weird plot point that was just sort of glazed over in this is the fact that like not only is Gotham City a crime-riddled shithole, but like economically, the town has got nothing going for it.
I think it speaks to that early Bruce Wayne Batman stuff we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is year two Batman, just like it's year two Bruce Wayne. He has not yet kind of started to dip his toe into bringing the city back, which all credit to the sequels really becomes a major part of a lot of the sequels is his efforts to get more involved in the city, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting through line.
Yeah, it yes.
When
And it's,
otherwise are not many, I will point out.
I mean, the biggest through line is Alfred. The fact that it's the same Alfred
right.
in all four movies is the weirdest thing. Because also at the same time, if you were to tell me now that the multiverse is something that has been introduced into DC with the Flash, probably the last time I mention it, but no promises. Actually, I know for a fact it's not going to be. It is. I would almost believe that Batman Returns is a completely different universe.
Right,
from
exactly.
Batman.
Might as well. The other two are, right?
Yes. But there are some. J.K. Simmons is freaking J. Jonah Jameson, regardless of your universe. Alfred
all things
is.
must contain J.K. Simmons.
Yeah. And when you look at Alfred, it's always Michael Gough. Michael Gough is Alfred in all four of these universes. Where
I guess
Batman,
I guess the big thing that I would point to is just the ways in which this also kind of really set up a lot of the expectations for what comic book movies were always going to be, and I don't think that was fair. It's not something we've really talked about because of how much we clearly love this movie, but like it did also kind of not do many favors for what comic book movies needed to then be going forward, right? They either needed to be this really edgy kind of thing, or they needed to not be that. But no matter what, they always define themselves by Batman. Are we the next Batman, or are we the next thing that's not Batman? And like that's all that they were for a decade more, maybe, depending on what kind of movies you're looking at now. Because we're saying all this as the Flash is out, and we'd be remiss to not touch on the idea that Keaton is back in it as Batman, right? Like that's kind of a big deal considering everything we've just said for the last 2 hours.
Yeah. Like Keaton is back as Batman in this movie. And it's why my mother wants to see it.
Yeah.
Like my mother's when I'm like the Flash is coming out and she's like, "What's the Flash?" And I'm like, "The movie with Michael Keaton as Batman again." And she's like, "Oh, the new Batman movie?" And I'm like, "I don't know if you're joking or not because why wouldn't you think of it as the next Batman movie?"
Or fuck me, the next Supergirl movie, or the next like they've done everything to push every other hero in the movie except.
Yeah, like it's wacky and wild, but then she's like, yeah, it was exciting to see him in the trailer before Guardians. And like, yeah, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to Spider-Man No Way Home the audience to the theaters, but like without having Tom Holland.
Yeah. Oh man. It's going to be really interesting to see how this movie does. Like we're not going to sit here and tell people to not go and see this thing, but like if you're not comfortable seeing the Flash, that's okay. Like I'm not, and I don't care to. I don't know. It's just really I want to go to the movies to enjoy the movie, and there's just been way too much around this film for me to ever be able to uncouple that. Maybe in the future if it's on TV or something, but even then I will probably find something else to watch.
I thought that I was gonna like watch a cam of it, like because it's out there, right? There are plenty of places that you can watch it out there right now on the high seas.
Well, we all had to get on a boat and go out in international waters for this conversation, but I'm glad we're having it.
No, it's worth it, right? We're the boat that rocked, Sejohn. Pirate radio if you're in America.
Be Dev. Yeah, you had me scared for a moment, but then you brought me back with a reference to pirate radio. All right.
But it is one of those situations where even then I'm like, no, I can't do this. It's too fresh right now. And on the one hand, I want to see it in the theater, but on the other hand, I can't bring myself to support this film. And the really crazy thing, right? Because the projected take for that movie in its opening weekend was about $65 million. They ended up only taking in $55 million against a $225 million budget, which is crazy. But then you're comparing it to Batman because of Michael Keaton, a film that did $40 million in its opening weekend. And I was ready to do all the inflation math and what that equals. It almost equals $1 billion in current day money, the $40 million that Batman made in its opening weekend back in 1989. Which, fuck me, inflation, right? Like, wow. But, that is crazy. That, to me, what we're going to be seeing from James Gunn, it is time. It is time for the DC universe to recalibrate itself.
I'm curious, though, how much it's going to either lean on this or ignore this movie. Because, I agree, and I think they agree, but I do think that a lot of people were assuming this was going to be the crutch they were going to lean on for a little while. And if this movie can't do that, then I guess it's kind of a win-win for Gunn in particular and his side of the whole thing, right? Is either this movie did really well and it gave them an excuse to reboot a bunch of shit, or it didn't do well and it gave them an excuse to reboot a bunch of shit. So
yeah, I mean, there's still Shazam: Fury of the Gods is a movie that happened. Still haven't been able to bring myself to it. Don't know how that's going to connect. There's still apparently an Aquaman 2 coming out.
Yeah. I mean, Black Adam didn't do well either, and we liked that one.
Black Adam did better in its opening weekend than The Flash was going to be the last thing that I bring up. Is that movie that, I mean, it was weirdly, and I know that it wasn't catered to you and I, but the things that they plucked from the DC pool to feature in that movie really did work for things that we're fans of. I mean, right. Dr. Fate being in that movie, it was sign me up for Siege.
Pierce Brosnan, who famously turned down the role of Batman because he had no interest in a comic book.
Right. Thank God they didn't do that. Batman needs to be American. Could you imagine Pierce Brosnan?
Oh, God. Okay, I think that's time to pull the ripcord.
Oh, it's definitely time. Well, it was a reference to the Christian Bale thing.
I know.
But no, it is probably about time to pull that ripcord.
Like Christian Bale's Batman, let's pull the ripcord out of this.
Speaking of ripcords that were pulled out of Batman, remember when Marlon Wayans was going to be Robin?
Oh my God! Wasn't there a talk of Eddie Murphy at some point too? With
I know Marlon Wayans was. It was going to it was a trilogy initially, and Harvey Dent was going to be still played by Billy D. Williams. Marlon Wayans was the one who was attached to be Robin.
Well, because I do believe at some point that it ended up in Ivan Reitman's office, and he came back and said the only way I'm doing this is, I believe what he said is if it's Bill Murray as Batman and I get Eddie Murphy as Robin.
Oh. I'll take worst movies ever for 200 Mayim.
To his credit, I think that was kind of his I don't want to do this job deal, right? By contract, we need to put this in front of you, and then he was like, well, by my personal moral code, I have to come back at you with something so fucking ridiculous that you will say no.
And yet, in some branch of the multiverse, that film exists. And I gotta tell you, Mr. Mom did pretty good as Batman in our universe. Who's to say that Dr. Peter Venkman as Batman doesn't work?
Yeah, and the Nutty Professor himself.
Why did you put a banana in the tailpipe of the Batmobile?
No.
Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Hey, then me wanna go home.
Well, at least you brought it back to Burton.
That's what I'm good at bringing it back to Burton. So yeah, anything else that you want to make sure you talk about, this is the Batman episode. This is the Batman 89 episode.
This is it. Yeah, no, we clearly love this movie. I still love this movie. I really never thought, we've always talked about how influential it has been, so like I shouldn't be as surprised as I am, but man, I am still blown away with all of the stuff that we just talked about today that I've never even thought of.
Yeah, it's very cool. Like, because I've always said that, like, this is the one that launched all the comic book ships that we experienced as children, like, growing up in a world post Batman 89. But, like, watching the film again and seeing every little thing that just really does come from it. Like, this was a weird confirmation of a lot of theories that I had. Stuff that I would love to delve deeper into. But, like, we don't have the time or the resources to do it with this. But, like, watch the movie. If you've never seen Batman 89 and you just listened to us talk about it for the past 2 hours, you could still go and watch the movie and enjoy it. Like, we haven't taken... Batman is such a malleable thing that even knowing those things, this is going to be a fun ride for you.
Yeah.
And if you have seen it, watch it again and think about how Iron Man from 2008 was weirdly influenced by this film that came out almost 20 years before.
I don't think it's that weird, as we've been talking about. Now, I think it's a hugely not obvious, but I think it would be silly to ignore the positive, the obvious stuff going on, right?
Yeah. No, it's true. But yeah, so that's it. So this has been our time capsule episode on Batman 1989. I'm not sure when this is dropping. Hopefully, we were able to keep my boss's daughter in the can for 3 months, and I'm very happy about that. If you haven't listened to that episode, the David Dorfman Cinematic Universe Part 2 of go load up our Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe episode on anger management, featuring Jack Napier himself, Jack Nicholson, and then go back and listen to that one, because anger management and my boss's daughter, it's a weird thing that we found.
It's a weird universe that we entered for just a moment. And I'm afraid may have had rippling effects throughout our universe, Sejohn. We witnessed the death of a star, Devon.
And we may have also uncovered the identities of some individuals that should have remained hidden and anonymous. But we may never know. But if you want to get in touch with us about this episode in particular, if you have your theories about Batman 89, if you think that we're just flat out wrong about what we said, we are available on Twitter, hopefully by the time this releases, at the Say Report. And also,
I wouldn't say hopefully. Maybe, but not hopefully.
Well, I mean, I guess just hopefully, because then I don't look like a fucking idiot by saying we're available on Twitter. I'm trying to save my own face from a rictus grin.
It'll be turned to Muskrat by the end of the year. we are available on Muskrat.
Anywho, that's at the Say Report. Also, any of your theories or comments directly for Sejohn, that's the best way to get in touch with him, since Sejohn has signed off of Twitter indefinitely by his own choice.
to avoid a bunch of shit like all of the Ezra Miller shit. We're not going to go there. They are very clearly trying to get their shit together, and I hope they figure it out. But man,
you get to avoid all the spoilers I've seen about The Flash. By not being on there.
And if you want to reach out to Dev and just kind of talk to him a little bit about his feelings on Bat toys, because there were so many of them, believe me, he's going to be a bigger expert than me when it comes to that stuff. You can find him at Devon D. Decker.
Yeah, I'd look forward to it. I've been cleaning through a lot of the collectibles that I still have in possession of. I found the penguins from Batman Returns.
I like the sauce you put on that, Dev. Are we getting too deep into this episode? Is that?
I think we've exhausted it all. So at this point, Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.